Well, Nader Hashemi is Associate Professor of Middle East and Islamic Politics at Georgetown University. He joins us live from Washington, D.C. Professor, appreciate your patience and thank you very much for joining us. So both Biden and Trump are claiming credit for the progress that's been made. But can you tell us what are the actual factors which push Israel and Hamas closer than ever before to a deal? I mean, it looks as though Iran's if you like, presence and its proxies as well, loom very large in terms of this equation.
I disagree that Iran is a major factor in this equation. I mean, that's often what you hear in some circles in Israel and in some circles in Washington, D.C. This is very much about, I think, the internal dynamics within Israel, within Gaza, and critically, the arrival of a new American president who has gone on record saying that he wants this issue to be resolved by the time that he assumes office. I mean, it's interesting to ask the question, why now? Why is there this momentum and optimism that we might get a ceasefire deal at this particular moment? What's happening that sort of can give us an indication that it might be a factor? And that's, we're less than 1 week left in the Biden presidency, and Donald Trump is the new president. And I think there's I think that's the big sort of difference, because the deal that we're talking about very much was on the table, in March, a very similar deal in May, and then in July when we were, talking about the same issue that we're getting close to a deal, nothing happened. So I think the arrival of the new president is the driving force that's getting us close to an agreement.
Okay, so he's read them the riot act, apparently. Steve Witkoff, Hamas reportedly accepting the deal. And assuming Israel does the same as well, Professor, how quickly could we see an actual exchange taking place as phase one of the agreement?
I suspect it'll happen soon after the new president is inaugurated. I think part of the calculation in Israel is that Netanyahu wants to hand Trump a victory. Trump loves to grandstand and claim that he's a leader on the global stage with stature. So I suspect Netanyahu really has been the key obstacle in preventing a deal from happening before. And that's not my personal opinion. Senior Israeli military intelligence and American officials, including Biden himself, have gone on record as saying that Netanyahu has been dragging this out to advance his own political career. So I think what's going to happen, my prediction is that over the next 6 days until we get to the inauguration of the new American president, there's not going to be any breakthrough. But as we get close to January the 20th, we're going to see the announcement of a breakthrough. And from Netanyahu's perspective, he'll view that as a gift to Donald Trump that he can then claim as he arrives in the White House.
So, Professor, could this be the beginning of a sort of long-term peace process, or are we simply looking at another temporary break in hostilities?
That's a good question. I think it's very important to emphasize that we don't get carried away by this talk of a ceasefire deal and the end of hostilities. The real story here is not what we're talking about in terms of negotiations in a ceasefire deal. The real story here is the devastation that has been wrought on the people of Gaza. Let's not forget that even after this deal is implemented, let's say best case scenario, everything goes according to plan, Gaza no longer exists. It's been pulverized. There's nothing to go back to. Reports indicate that it would take 15 years in the best case scenario just to remove the rubble. We're talking about at least 46,000 Palestinians have been killed. The real figures are probably much higher because many people are buried under the rubble. And, most people's homes have been destroyed. The basic institutions needed to sustain life, water, sanitation, electricity, all of that has been decimated. And so if we get to a ceasefire deal, and hopefully we do, and hostages get returned, and Palestinian prisoners who've been illegally and unjustly detained also get to return to their families, what about the 2 million people in Gaza? Their future is uncertain, and if I had to predict, it doesn't look very good. There's no hope on the horizon for them. So that's really the big story, which is, I think, why this story is going to continue to be in the news even after we get to a ceasefire deal, because the whole question of the future of Gaza and really the future of the Israel-Palestine conflict, which has to be a future where both Israelis and Palestinians can live in peace and security and dignity. That issue is unresolved, and it doesn't look like it will be resolved in the foreseeable future.
I mean, given the scale of destruction in Gaza, as you mentioned, I mean, is there a realistic path for rebuilding the region, and who should bear the brunt of it?
For rebuilding Gaza, is that your question?
Yes, the brunt of the responsibility, that is.
Well, there's a basic principle of law that those who are guilty of the crime have to bear the responsibility, and so first and foremost, it's the government of Benjamin Netanyahu who bears command and control responsibility. It's not a coincidence that there are international arrest warrants out for Netanyahu and his former defense minister by the International Court of Justice. Sorry, by the International Criminal Court in The Hague. It's not a coincidence also that the highest legal body in the world, the International Court of Justice, is now investigating the charge of genocide against Israel based on a very famous case that was brought to South Africa to the court. And so primarily it's first and foremost Israel, but of course Israel has been able to do this devastation and wreak this havoc on the people of Gaza because of strong, unflinching, and ongoing support from the West, primarily the United States. The houses that were destroyed, the lives that were lost, were overwhelmingly a function and a byproduct of arms shipments that were sent by the United States first and foremost, into Israel, that were then dropped on Gaza. So that's where the criminal responsibility bears. And I think as the Biden administration signs off and says goodbye and sort of is touting its own accomplishments. I mean, that's what's happening right now in Washington, D.C. Biden and Blinken are claiming great victories in terms of their foreign policy. This issue of Gaza is going to haunt the high officials of the Biden administration for a very long time. They're going to be chased by courts and charged with complicity in war crimes and crimes against humanity, and violating even existing American law that says that the U.S. government cannot and must not ship arms to countries that are engaged in gross human rights violations. So while this we're seeing a change of government in Washington D.C., I think there's going to be a legacy here for the Biden administration that will haunt the senior officials for a very, very long time.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Hashemi, Nader Hashemi, Associate Professor of Middle East and Islamic Politics at Georgetown University.